In this video, we're going to cover REST APIs and how you can make RESTful calls to fetch data from the web into your Power BI reports. We're going to briefly talk about what it is and how you can make RESTful calls to get data from the web, as well as some other scenarios that you might encounter when using REST APIs, such as authenticating using tokens or dealing with pagination. All of that and more. So without further ado, let's get started. Hi, my name is Fernan, and welcome to the Solutions Abroad YouTube channel, where we cover tips, tricks, and best practices when working with Power BI. I upload new videos every week, so make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified when a new one is out. So REST API is essentially a standard application interface that lets different computer systems interact with each other through the web. So just think of it as a common language that is used in the web so that different computer systems can sort of understand each other. So when one is asking for data or one is trying to update something, they kind of have this common language that they understand what they're talking about. So how it typically works is that you have your client, which sends some instructions to the server, which is the server that hosts and has the data. The instruction that the client sends is usually in a HTTP protocol, and this can be different things. It could be anything. It could be, getting a list of users from the server, or maybe updating a list in the server. So the server basically responds back to this request by either giving the user or the client back the result of their query, or maybe a result, or maybe just a confirmation that the action was completed. This is an extremely powerful tool to have, especially if you're working with data, just because it opens up a lot of possibilities for you, in a sense that you can connect to basically any kind of computer system in the web to kind of use as part of your data model. So let's start with the easiest type of REST APIs, which are public REST APIs. So these are APIs that you can basically just call without needing to do anything else like authorization or pagination rules. So let's have a look at this site, restcountries.com. I will leave a link to all of these samples that I'm using in the description box below, so you can give it a try for yourself. And this specific website basically just lets you create or use RESTful queries to get a list of countries and their different properties. So here we are looking at some of its documentation and its endpoints, and it's a fairly simple, straightforward website that you can test on how to get data using REST APIs. So here we have a few things here, like how to use certain endpoints and without needing anything at all. So we're gonna pick one at random here. We're just gonna take this one, the all, which basically just gets us all of the countries that is available for us to fetch. So I'm gonna just copy that URL. I'm gonna go to Power BI Desktop. I'm gonna go to Get Data and then click Web. Here it will let me paste the URL, in which case we will just simply send the URL for this RESTful API. If you hit OK, give it a few seconds. And there you go. So essentially, by simply just pasting that API, it simply converted that return that it gave us as a list into something that is readable for us, ready to use. So a lot of these Actually, all of these steps were created for me automatically, which sort of converts that resulting file from that REST call into this file. While it's looking like we can simply just use this, I want to show you how that looks like without the interface that we have in Power BI. So if I just paste that same URL into my browser, this is what it returns, which is essentially just a JSON style file format, which is then converted into a tabular format record that we have in Power BI. So a lot of these things are, properties and items, which are basically just countries, and Power BI just makes it easier for us to work in this format. So this is basically what it returns. REST APIs have what we call endpoints, which lets you manipulate the results that your queries return. So it might be adding a filter, or maybe adding some values, or maybe changing which fields you bring. Different REST services provide different types of endpoints that you can use, which obviously differs. So you typically, when you're pulling from a service, you would check their API documentation documentation. Like in this case, for example, we're looking at the REST countries here, and we are using their API documentation as a kind of reference on how to pull the data. And we just use this one, the all, which is basically just gets us everything. But you will notice that there are other endpoints here that you can call, and it will give you different things. So an easier one would be this one. So this basically changes which fields you get when you make the RESTful call. So for example, it's looking like it will only return us languages and the capitals data when we use this in a call. So and which is useful when you want to simply just get the data that you are using, and it's typically a good way to do so if you want to keep your reports lean, obviously to reduce the traffic, the data traffic that you have in your data model by only bringing in the ones that you actually will be using. So I'm going to copy this one and I'm going to paste it into the browser here just to show you how it looks like. Again, it's in this JSON type format, but as you notice, it's a little bit smaller than the previous one because, like, although it's listing out all of the countries, it only needs to list out certain fields from each of those countries. So let's have a look at how that looks like in Power BI. So let's do new source once more, hit web. We'll paste that endpoint that we just copied and we'll hit OK. And just give it a second or two. Here we go. So we still have a few columns here that I don't really want to have. Like, for example, it's just giving us a lot of these other language types, which we don't really want it in this format, or actually we don't even want it at all. So you can actually modify these endpoints yourself and give it the parameters that you need. So for example, if we click web again, and let's paste that same URL, but instead, let's just get the capital names because we're not really interested on the languages. So I'm going to remove that from the fields part of the endpoint and hit OK. Okay, here we are. So that is a lot more usable for me because it just has the capital with all of the countries that is in this REST call. So that's how we use endpoints with REST API. So public APIs, as I mentioned at the beginning, don't really need authentication. So these APIs would typically contain information that is not confidential. In usual cases, your REST APIs will need some sort of authentication, and these are what we would call private APIs. So let's have a look at some examples of what private APIs are and how you can use them. So the one that I want to show you is from this website called Open Weather Map, which is essentially a site that lets you use REST API to get the weather from or in certain locations. While this is not very sensitive information, they require you to use API keys, which is something that is generated as part of your account with Open Weather. I believe it's free, at least when I use it and for testing purposes only. And here we are looking at their API documentation, which shows you sort of some examples of what calls you can make. So here we're looking at the API call for the Open Weather Map, which the highlighted values are the values that you change yourself. And the last bit here is the API key that you need to replace. So it's something that is tied to your account. So what I want to do is try to make this call and see if we can get this data out of Open Weather. Now, in preparation for this video, I've already created my account with Open Weather. It's completely free. And I've already created my API key, which is what we will use today. Just to give you a fair warning, I will share my API key as part of this demo, but typically your API key is something that you would keep to yourself because it's linked to your account. So when you make a call, the service or the REST API service knows that it's your account that's making that call. And you really don't want other people to be using your API keys to make API calls. So after this demo, I'm going to delete all of my API keys so you won't be able to use it. But just for this demo purposes, I'm going to show them to you. So I'm going to copy this URL and I'm going to put it into Notepad. And actually, maybe let's not use that one because I don't know any latitude or longitude. So I'm going to copy this one so we can just replace the API key. And then from the Open Weather, so this is the Notepad that I'm trying to paste or copy paste into. Let's go from this Open Weather. Let's go to my API keys. So as I mentioned, I've already created my account. So that means that I have this key that I can use. So I simply copy this and replace this API key bit here. Copy the whole thing. Let's go back to Power BI. new source and web, and then let's simply paste it. So if you hit OK, hopefully it should return us the weather information for this geographical location that we picked. So here we go. So it's given us some information on that coordinates that we have copied and pasted. So it gives you information like what type of weather it is over there, the temperature, pressure, humidity, basically all of the information that you would expect a REST API to return. So this is actually a lot of really cool information. And that is how you make a RESTful call with authentication. Let's have a look at another example from another website. In this case, we're going to cover and try to use GitHub. So GitHub is essentially a website where you can store your projects as repositories. And it's something that I use a lot for version controls with my Power BI projects. And this website allows you to essentially make RESTful calls, a mixture of public and private APIs. And I just want to show you how you can generate tokens so that you can, query GitHub through REST APIs. So here we are in the REST API documentation, and actually I have already a call that I know that I can use, which is to give me a list of all of my repositories that I own. And the call is this one. So api.github.com/user/repo. Now, with private API calls, it does require you to have some authorization. So again, we need to generate some token or some type of token. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just go to okay. So what I've done is I've just recreated the token. It's the same as creating a new token essentially, and it will give you this token that you can use, which as per the API documentation, you can add it as part of your header when you make that call, that REST API call. So I've copied that token. So now we're basically ready for us to start working on this RESTful call in Power BI. So let's open up Power BI desktop here once more, hit new source and open web. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste this URL that we have, which is essentially just the, as I mentioned, the call that lets us get all the repositories that I own. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click advanced. So the advanced lets you control the URL parts of your calls. So this is where you would add anything part of your header or maybe your endpoints, and it just gives you a better interface to work with. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're just going to use this to add the authentication, the token, as part of the HTTP request header. So I already know the format that we need, which I believe needs to be simply just token space. You paste the token there, and then the first part here will just need to be authorization, something like this. And if I got that correct, if I hit OK here, that should give me access. So let me just check my spelling. Let me just check if I've done everything here. So token, authorization. Okay. I think I missed the S here on our call. So if I hit OK now, let's have a look and see if we still get the error. Okay, perfect. So here we are. So the query returns me just 3 rows of data, which is essentially just all of the repositories that I own. At least in this account, there's 3 of them here. So it's just giving me all of the information for that repository. So things like followers, owners, which are really useful information that you wouldn't get if you didn't have the authorization to do so. So the last thing that I wanted to cover is pagination, which is something that you will encounter if you're pulling a lot of data from one source, not necessarily a REST API call, but typically you will get this sort of limitation, especially if you have results that tend to be on the larger side. So when you make a RESTful call and the results that you're getting from the server is too big that it gives or it results in some sort of server-side performance issue, there's typically a solution that puts a limit on how many items are in a call. So instead of having a big chunk of results to give to you in one call, it's separated into different pages so that it's a lot more manageable that way. And that's essentially what pagination is. So this means that in Power BI, we need to have or add or create some sort of loop that lets you go through each of these pages and manage them individually so that we can combine them all into one table in the end. So in the REST API documentation, there is a page here dedicated to pagination. And there's a lot of things here that if you're actually not familiar with pagination, it's actually really helpful. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to keep it very simple because just to give you guys an idea. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it a little bit easier for you guys to understand how pagination or how we can use pagination. So here is the call that I know that will work. It's a public API call. And as you notice, there are a few endpoints that I've added here. So first is it gives me the list of projects that have the language of Python. It's giving me page 1. And we've also added an endpoint here. So per page is equals to 10. So each page of this query will only have 10 projects. So if you hit enter, as you notice, we don't need any authorization and it will just give you the results like this. Now, what you'll notice here is that it gives you a total count here of how many items of results this query returns. But the thing is that this file itself is pretty small. That's because we have this per page limit. So 10 projects per query. Now, if we want to get multiple pages, like for example, more than 10, maybe we want to get 50 or something like this, we will have this first call for the page 1. And then what we'll need to do is adjust the endpoint here to 2. So if you hit enter, now will give you the next set of 10. So as you can see, there is a loop that we can create that goes through the first 10, the second 10, up to how many pages that we want. And I'm going to show you how you can do that all in Power Query. So I'm going to go to Power Query editor once more. I'm going to create a new query here. I'm going to paste our query here, hit OK. Okay, so as you can see, there's 10 items in here. We're going to just name this into search. And then what we're going to do is convert this into a function. So the function, we're going to add a parameter here. We're going to call this page. And then where we have the page part of our call, where it says 1, we'll replace that with the parameter that will feed it. So page, like this. So when I hit OK, what you'll notice is that it changes from a table into a function. So now it expects you to give it a parameter for it to run. So we're going to use that in a second. So let's start again. So let's create a new blank query like this. I'm going to just create an array here. So 1 to 5. If you hit enter, that should hopefully give us a list of 1 to 5 right here. We'll convert this into a table. And then we're going to simply click add column, invoke custom function. And what it will do is it will let us choose which function we want to use, in which case we're going to use search. And then we want to feed it the data that we have in column 1, which is the numbers. Actually, I think this will fail. Let me just convert this into a text first. So now we're going to go invoke custom function, choose search once more. And if you hit OK and expand these tables, and there you go. So what it's done is it's created a loop for each of the rows in the list of 5 that we have, so that it gives us the 50 or 5 pages worth of repositories, which is basically 50. And that's really it for this video. So I used this same solution in a video that I created a long time ago to scrape the Glassdoor website for reviews. Now, that wasn't really a RESTful API call type service because I was basically just scraping the front end part of their website. But the solution and how it works is basically the same. So if you want to learn more about how I used this loop function in that context, go check out that video. Thanks for watching as usual. Give this video a like if you found it useful. Give it a dislike if you didn't, so that to do better for next time. Ask your questions in the comment section box below so I can help you and you can help others. If you like this video, we have a Patreon page where you can support the channel and get exclusive perks like early access, demo files, and credits at the end of these videos. Thanks again for watching and see you in the next one.